Hi, Candace here, and welcome to kickoff of World Card Week, all leading up to the crop at Clique Kits next Saturday. So there's a look at the card kit that you can get in the Clique Kit shop. I'll leave all the links down below. So here I'm starting out with my card base, and my card base is just slightly larger than a normal size card. So it is 1/4 of an inch all around larger than a normal size card. The actual front of the base card will be a normal size card. I'm using these dies from Mama Elephant, and it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 is the front of the card. So I'm going to use the banner die with some paper from the 6x6 pad in the light blue, and then the actual base front of the card is going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and that'll be out of the cream pattern paper from the 6x6 pad. So I'm just going to take those and run each one of those through my die cut machine, my Big Shot, and then place that to the side. So now I have the front of the card base and the little banner die. So I'm going to use the stamp set. This is from Wildflower and Company, and I'm going to use the Hello stamp. So I'm using my grid mat to line that up to make sure that I get it all perfectly spaced out. And normally I would mask off part of the stamp that I'm not using, but because I know it's not going to show up on the banner, I'm just going to stamp it down. So I used my magic powder bag to get all the static off of the banner, and then I used my Versamark ink pad, which is a sticky ink pad that's going to make the ink nice and sticky for my embossing powder to stick to. So the embossing powder that I'm using today is from Ranger. It's the super fine in platinum, and I think it's my favorite embossing powder. It's just such a pretty color, and it kind of looks like a mix between silver and gold. It's really pretty. So now that I have that on, I'm going to heat up my heat gun. And I like to let my heat gun get nice and hot before I bring it to the paper because it reduces warping on the paper. So as soon as that heat gun is nice and hot, I'm going to bring that to the banner, and I'm going to heat up the embossing powder. Now you want to make sure that you just heat the embossing powder until it starts to raise. The second it's raised, you want to turn it off because then it will actually flatten out. So to make sure that that embossing is nice and raised, you just want to heat it till it's heated and then remove the heat. I also like to heat it a little bit from the back of the paper to make sure that the paper doesn't warp. So I cleaned off my surface and my stamp and put that all away, and now I'm ready to assemble the card. So the banner die has marks on the paper now where I can bend and fold the banner. So they're just little score marks. So it's really easy to put that banner together. So now I'm going to work on the front of my card. So I have that little banner and I have some red line tape, and what I'm going to do is line it up with my grid mat and pull that red line tape across the front of my card base. And then what I'm going to do is take some of that seam binding that comes in the kit, and I'm going to run it along that red line tape. Now red line tape is super sticky, so it works really great at adhering things down that wouldn't normally be adhered down to paper. So works really great with fabrics or flare, anything like that, because it's just super sticky and super strong. So I'm just deciding which color seam binding I want to use, and I'm pulling the buttons from the kit because I know I'm going to use a button, so that'll help me decide which seam binding to use. So I like to take my bone folder and just burnish down that red line tape to make sure it stays down nice and good. I'm going to grab some washi tape and adhere the base to my grid mat just to make it a little bit easier for me to adhere that seam binding. So I'm going to start at the left hand corner and just place a little bit of that seam binding down and then wrinkle it up and then adhere the next section down. So you'll start to see as I move across that paper, I'm just kind of wrinkling up that seam binding to make it look like a ruffle. So I'm pulling that across the entire front of the card base. And normally I would stitch down the ruffle, but because I'm going to also be adding a few other embellishments to the front of the card, I didn't want to add the extra stitching. So I think with this red line tape, it's super sticky, so I definitely think it'll work just fine. But I do take an extra second to really push it down and make sure it sticks really well. So after I get that ruffle done, I'm going to trim the edges and I'm going to adhere the seam binding to the back of my card just using those 2 pieces of washi tape that I have right there. So because that card base is going to be glued down to the front of my card, I know that the washi tape is not going to show, so it'll work just fine. So now I'm going to take some twine that also comes in the kit, and I'm going to place that over the front of that seam binding, over the center of it. Just adhering that down also with some washi tape that come from my stash, and going to pull that over the front center of that seam binding and adhere it to the other side. So I'm just bending the card back and forth. There was a little bit of warping on it because I think I had pulled the red line tape a little bit too tight. So I'm just going to pop up that banner with some dimensional adhesive and place that on the lower right hand corner of my card front. Again, just lining it up with my grid mat to make sure it's all nice and even and straight. After I glue that down, I'm going to grab those buttons that also come in the kit from Fancy Pants Flutter Collection, and I'm going to grab a little butterfly. So I'm going to tuck that little butterfly behind the banner. And then my card front is done and I'm ready to adhere that to the front of my card. So at first I thought I would pop it up, but then because of the dimension of the banner, I was just thinking it might be better just to adhere it straight down to that card base. So I decided to put away the adhesive and just go with my flat adhesive and glue that down to the front of my card. So simple and easy card, nice and fast. I like pretty clean cards, and just like my layouts, just simple and clean. And I decided that why not, because this card was so easy, I would also decorate the envelope. So I have these vellum envelopes from my stash, and I have this die from Simon Says Stamp, and it's a label die for the front of your envelope. So I'm going to use that die and cut out 2 pieces of pattern paper from the 6x6 pad, the polka dot and that light tan that I used on the front of the card. Because that polka dot paper is pretty dark, I needed to cut out the label to write the address on or the sentiment to, because it would just be too hard to write on that polka dot paper. So I'm going to use my Big Shot and run that label die and also the front of the label die through that Big Shot so I can decorate the front of my envelope. So with these envelope labels, they just go across the front and then hook over the side and will cover up the tab to the envelope. So you don't want to fully adhere the label until you have the card inside the envelope, and then you pull the label over the back tab of your envelope. So I'm just going to finish running those through, and then I'm going to adhere that label to the front of that vellum envelope. So I have that vellum envelope, and I'm going to pull that out and wrap the label around. I'm going to adhere that down with just some of my glue runner. And then I'm also going to grab a button, another button from the kit, and some twine, and just wrap that around the button and add that to the front of the envelope just to add a little bit more interest. Now, I normally wouldn't send this kind of card through the mail, so this will probably go on top of a gift for somebody that I just give the gift to. So, and that completes the card and envelope for today. Thanks so much for stopping by. Make sure you stop by tomorrow. There'll also be either a video on the Clique Kits YouTube page and mine, just to have you hop all around and get excited for the crop next Saturday. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a great week.
There's no. No song.